walks out without any introduction, no announcement, no fanfare. The stage is quiet. He doesn't go to the center right away. He walks slowly, like someone who just came from somewhere real, like someone who just finished sitting with something heavy and came straight here without changing clothes or preparing a face. If stops, looks at the floor for a long moment, then looks up, and there's something different in his eyes tonight. Not sadness exactly, not joy exactly, something in between those things, something that only exists on the other side of a very long road. And then he speaks. It was a Tuesday. I remember that specifically because there was nothing remarkable about it. No occasion, no milestone, no reason for the night to be different from any other night. The city outside was doing what cities do, moving, humming, indifferent to whatever was happening in any particular room, in any particular building. The light in the room was the kind of light that doesn't have an agenda. Just a lamp, just a Tuesday, just me sitting with something I'd been circling for years without knowing I was circling it. And then something shifted, not dramatically, not the way shifts happen in movies, with music in slow motion and a moment so perfectly composed that you recognize its importance in real time. More like the way your eyes adjust when you walk into a dim room, gradually, quietly, almost without noticing, until suddenly you can see things that were always there but that the darkness had been hiding. It was like that, like my eyes adjusting, like something coming into focus that had been blurry for so long I'd stopped noticing the blur and started thinking the blur was just what seeing looked like. And what came into focus was this: I had been doing love wrong. Not wrong in a moral sense, not wrong in a way that made me a bad person, wrong in the way that someone is wrong when they've learned a thing from imperfect teachers in imperfect conditions and have been practicing the imperfect version for so long that the imperfect version feels like the real thing. Wrong the way you can be wrong about something for years, and then one ordinary Tuesday night, something quiet and clear arrives and simply shows you the difference between what you had and what was actually possible. And sitting with that, with the gap between those two things, was one of the most clarifying and, I'll be honest, one of the most humbling experiences of my life. Because here's the thing about realizing you've been wrong about something important: the first feeling is not relief. The first feeling, at least for me, was something closer to grief. Grief for the version of love I'd been accepting as sufficient. Grief for the times I'd convinced myself that what I had was what love was, that the anxiety was just what love felt like, that the walking on eggshells was just what intimacy required, that the constant low hum of not quite enough was just the realistic version of something I'd made too romantic in my imagination. Grief for the time spent inside a version of love that was actually something else, something smaller, something that borrowed love's name but didn't have love's nature. I want to talk about that tonight. Not just about what love should feel like, though I'm going to get there, I'm going to spend a long time there, but about the process of learning it, about what it costs to finally understand it, about what you have to be willing to see clearly in order to arrive at the real thing, about the specific, difficult, necessary grief of recognizing that you have been living inside a counterfeit and then making the decision to stop, because that decision, the decision to stop accepting less than love while calling it love, is one of the bravest things a person can do. And it is underrated. And I want to give it its proper weight tonight. Moves to the edge of the stage, sits down on it, not behind any podium, not at any safe distance, just sits elbows on knees. Closely, let me tell you what I thought love felt like before that Tuesday night. And I want to be careful here not to be uncharitable, not to myself, not to the people I loved badly or who loved me badly. Everyone was doing their best. Everyone was working from what they had. But the doing your best version of love when what you have is a wound and a pattern and a set of unexamined assumptions, that version of love can cause real damage. And mine did, and I need to acknowledge that before I can talk about what came after. I thought love felt like needing, like a specific, consuming, almost painful need for the other person that confirmed they mattered. The more it hurt to be away from them, I thought, the more real it was. The more the relationship demanded of me, my attention, my energy, my constant management of their feelings and responses. The more I thought I was invested, the more anxious I was about where I stood, whether they were happy, whether I was doing enough. The more I interpreted that anxiety as proof of how much I cared. I confused the intensity of the fear with the depth of the love. And I know I'm not alone in this. I know this is not an original confusion. I know that a huge number of people, maybe most people at some point, have lived inside this particular misunderstanding. Because intensity and love do feel similar in the body. The racing heart, the constant preoccupation, the way the other person takes up enormous space in your mind. Those physical experiences are shared between genuine love and anxious attachment. The body doesn't always tell you which one you're in, and so you trust the intensity. You think this must be real because it feels so large. This must be love because it demands so much. This must be worth it because it costs so much. And you stay, and you work, and you try, and you give more, and you try to be more. And you blame yourself when it doesn't feel right because surely the problem is in your giving, in your being, in your trying, not in the fundamental nature of what you're inside. I spent time in that, longer than I want to admit, long enough that it started to feel like the only possible version, long enough that I couldn't remember clearly what it had felt like before the anxiety was a constant. And on that Tuesday night, I remembered, or maybe not remembered, discovered for the first time in a way I could feel rather than just understand intellectually what it was supposed to feel like instead. And it was so quiet. That's the first thing I want to tell you about what love should feel like. It is quiet. Not silent. Love is not the absence of noise or conflict or difficulty. But underneath all of that, in the bedrock layer, it is quiet. It does not hum with the frequency of threat. It does not keep you in a constant low grade state of alertness, scanning for signs of trouble, monitoring for shifts in temperature, managing and adjusting and performing in order to keep the environment stable. The baseline of it, the thing it feels like when you're just existing inside it on an ordinary day, is quiet, is steady, is something very close to peace. That was what I found on that Tuesday. A quiet, a stillness I hadn't realized I'd been missing, and with it came the recognition that the absence of that quiet had been the problem all along. That what I'd been calling love had been, in part, the absence of peace. And peace, genuine, settled, I am safe here peace, is not just compatible with love. It is love's ground. It is what love, when it is right, provides. You should feel safe. That is the first thing. In the love that is right for you, in the love that is actually love and not a wound wearing love's clothing, you should feel safe. Not the safety of being unchallenged, not the safety of never being uncomfortable or never being asked to grow or never encountering friction, but safe in the foundational sense. Safe in the sense that you do not have to perform. Safe in the sense that the relationship is not a test you might fail. Safe in the sense that when you have a hard day and you are not your best self, the love does not withdraw. It stays, it holds, it says, I see you're struggling, I'm here. Safe in the sense that you are not one wrong move away from losing the thing. If you are one wrong move away from losing the thing, if you are constantly aware of the thinness of the margin between being loved and having the love rescinded, that is not love. That is conditional approval dressed in love's clothes. And it is exhausting and it is damaging and you deserve better. Love should not be something you can lose by being human. Stands up, starts to move slowly. Let me tell you the second thing I understood that night, and this one took longer to arrive at, came later in the same night, after I'd sat with the first thing for a while. Love should make you more yourself, not less. This sounds simple. It sounds like something you'd embroider on a pillow and not think too hard about. But I want you to actually think about it, because I think when you really look at it, it is the most clarifying measure of whether what you have is love. Does this relationship, this specific, particular relationship that you are in, or that you are evaluating, or that you are missing, or that you are hoping for, does it make you more yourself? Does it create the conditions in which the things that are truest about you can surface and grow and be expressed? Does the person you love make you feel like the full version of you is welcome, not just the convenient parts, not just the easy parts, not just the parts that are useful to them, but the whole thing? The weird parts, the intense parts, the parts you're not sure are likable, the parts that are still being figured out. Or does it make you smaller? Does it require you to mute certain frequencies of yourself in order to be acceptable? Does it ask you subtly or directly to be less opinionated, less emotional, less needy, less yourself, to sand down the parts that create friction, to become a more manageable version, to shrink into the shape that the relationship requires? Because I have been in both, and the difference between them is not subtle. The difference is the difference between breathing fully and breathing shallowly, between taking up the space that is actually yours and permanently angling your shoulders to avoid touching the walls, between being a person in a relationship and being a performance in a relationship. The love that is right for you does not ask you to perform, it asks you to be present, and those two things could not be more different. On that Tuesday night, I understood, for the first time in my body rather than just my mind, that I had spent significant portions of my loving life in performance, performing okayness, performing low maintenance, performing the version of myself that was least likely to be too much, to require too much, to take up more space than the relationship could comfortably hold. I had been editing myself continuously in the service of maintaining something that turned out not to be worth the editing. And the grief of that is specific and real, and I want to name it without drowning in it. Because it is also a beginning. The moment you recognize the performance is the moment you can stop performing. The moment you see the shrinking is the moment you can start taking up your actual space. And taking up your actual space, living at your actual size, being your actual self in a relationship that can hold all of it, is one of the most extraordinary experiences I know. It is what love that is actually love feels like. A pauses, hands in pockets, looking at the floor for a moment. I want to tell you what else I wrote that night. Because there was more. There was more than I expected when I sat down. I wrote about ease. And I want to be careful with this one because I know ease can sound like the absence of effort. And I don't mean it that way. I believe in effort. I believe love requires effort, consistent, intentional, non negotiable effort. I believe that real love is not passive, not automatic, not self sustaining without attention. I believe you have to choose it, intend it, and show up for it actively. But I also believe, and this is what I understood that night, that effort and ease are not opposites. That in love that is right, even the effort has a quality of ease to it. That when you are with the right person, working through the hard things doesn't feel like dragging something uphill with no traction. It feels like hard work that has a direction. It feels like difficulty with a purpose you both believe in. It feels like the effort is going somewhere, is building something, is in service of a thing you both want. What I had confused for a long time with love was effort that felt like swimming against a current, effort that was entirely consumed in maintenance, in keeping the structure intact, in managing the other person's reactions, in emptying the conflicts, and being always slightly on alert. Effort with no surplus. Effort that left nothing over for actual living, for actual joy, for the actual experience of being two people who love each other and get to exist in that love as a source of warmth rather than labor. The ease I'm talking about is this: in the right love, you can exhale. Not always, not in every moment, but in the general ambient atmosphere of the relationship, you can exhale. You are not bracing, you are not managing, you are not performing. You are just there with them. And the being there is the thing, the being there is enough. Not because nothing difficult ever happens, but because the foundation is solid enough that the difficult things can be met without the whole structure trembling. That ease, the ease of being able to exhale, the ease of being with someone in the unperformed way. I thought for a long time it was a luxury. I thought it was the kind of thing that sounded nice but wasn't really available in real relationships between real complicated people. I thought real love always came with that hum of threat, that frequency of anxiety, that constant monitoring. I was wrong. And I want to say that without ambiguity and without qualification, I was wrong. That hum is not love. That hum is the absence of safety. And the absence of safety is not a feature of love. It is a wound that love is supposed to heal. A sits down on the edge of the stage again, quieter now. Let me tell you about gentleness. Because this one surprised me. This one arrived late that night when I was almost done writing, and it arrived quietly, and it is the one that has stayed with me most completely. I understood that night that love, real love, the right kind, is gentle with you. And I don't mean gentle in the sense of soft or uncritical or unwilling to tell you hard truths. I mean gentle in the sense of fundamentally kind, in the sense of having your well-being as a real and present priority, in the sense of handling the tender parts of you, the parts you show when you're not being careful, the parts that are still hurt, the parts that are still afraid, with care. People who love you are careful with you, not careful in the overprotective, can't say anything difficult sense, but careful in the sense of being aware that you are a person who can be hurt, that the things they say and do land in a real human being who has a real interior life that can be bruised. Careful in the sense of being aware of their own power over you, the power that comes automatically with being someone who matters, and choosing not to use that power against you. Because people who love you have power over you. That's an uncomfortable thing to say, but it's true. The people who matter to you have the power to cause you significant pain simply by virtue of mattering. And love, real love, is the choice to hold that power carefully, to not weaponize the access you have been given, to not use knowledge of someone's vulnerabilities as ammunition, to not apply pressure to the tender places. I had been in love that didn't do that. That was not always careful with the power. That occasionally, in moments of its own fear or pain or defensiveness, turned the access it had into leverage, not maliciously, not with intention. But the effect on the receiving end was the same: a slow, accumulating sense that my vulnerabilities were not safe with this person, that I had to be careful about which parts I revealed because the revealed parts might later be used against me. And I want to name what that costs. What it costs to be in love, where you have to be careful about how much you reveal. Because what it costs is the love itself, not immediately, gradually. It costs you the depth of it, because depth requires trust, and trust requires safety. And when the safety is unreliable, when the love has occasionally demonstrated that the vulnerable parts aren't entirely safe, you pull back. Not consciously, not as a decision, but as a physical response to a real threat. The walls come up, the editing begins, and what you're left with is two people in a relationship that can never go as deep as it could because neither of you is all the way in anymore. The love that is right for you does not do that. The love that is right for you holds your vulnerable parts like something precious, like something to be protected, not exploited. The person who is right for you does not make you regret showing them the real thing. They make you feel, after having shown them, safer than you were before. They make the vulnerability worth it. That is the specific thing love should feel like when you show someone the soft parts. It should feel like relief, not exposure. The relief of no longer carrying the soft parts alone. Stands, moves, energy shifting slightly, getting to something important. I want to talk about the night itself, about what was happening inside me as I was writing all of this, because it was not all clarity and revelation. It was also grief, as I said, and also fear, a specific fear that I want to name. The fear was, if I accept this, if I take seriously this new understanding of what love should feel like, if I hold it as the standard, if I stop accepting less, what if I'm alone? What if the right kind of love, the kind that is safe and gentle and lets me exhale, the kind that makes me more myself rather than less? What if that kind is rare enough that holding out for it means I don't get it? What if the choice is between the imperfect version I've been in and nothing? I sat with that fear for a long time that night. I didn't try to argue myself out of it because I think dismissing fear without sitting with it is just another form of not dealing with it. I let it be there. I let it ask its question. I let it make its case. And then I answered it. And the answer was, even if that were true, even if holding out for the right kind of love meant waiting longer, or the waiting was hard, or the solitude was real, even then, the alternative is worse. The alternative is continuing to participate in love that is less than love. The alternative is continuing to shrink, to perform, to accept the hum of anxiety as the soundtrack of intimacy. The alternative is telling the part of me that has always known something was wrong, that it was wrong about being wrong. The alternative is another year, another decade, another version of my life spent inside something that borrowed love's name, but didn't have love's nature. And I could not do that. The moment I had seen clearly, I could not unsee. The moment I understood what it was supposed to feel like, the counterfeit version lost its ability to pass. And so the only direction was forward, into the uncertainty, into the waiting, if waiting was what was required, into the willingness to be alone, actually alone, rather than in the particular loneliness of being with the wrong person. That willingness, the willingness to be alone rather than badly accompanied, is also something I understood that night. It is an act of self-respect, not self-sufficiency in the closed "I don't need anyone's" sense, but respect for your own worth that expresses itself in the refusal to settle for less than what you deserve, in the decision to honor the love you are capable of giving by only giving it somewhere it can be fully received and fully returned. You deserve that, the full return, not the half return, not the almost but not quite return, the full thing. And you will only get it if you stop accepting the partial version as enough. Let me tell you what I also wrote. What came toward the end of the night, when the grief had settled and the fear had been sat with and I was left with something cleaner. I wrote about what it is going to feel like. Present tense, intentional. Not what love used to feel like or what love should feel like in the abstract, but what it is going to feel like. As a commitment, as a direction, as a description of the thing I was now oriented toward. It is going to feel like being known and staying wanted. That specific combination, because either alone is not the same thing. Being known without being wanted is just exposure. Being wanted without being known is just being desired for a projection. The two together, someone who has seen you clearly, including the difficult parts, and still wants you, still chooses you, still reaches for you. That is the thing. That is what it is going to feel like. It is going to feel like mattering without performing. Like the person cares about you. Your actual day, your actual thoughts, your actual experience of being alive. Not because they are being polite, not because they are going through the motions of a caring relationship, but because they are genuinely interested in the specific person that you are. Because you are interesting to them. Because they find the way your mind works and the way you see things and the things that matter to you to be genuinely, not obligatorily fascinating. It is going to feel like being a priority. Not every moment. not above every other thing in their life, but in the real sense, the sense of being in the calculations, the sense of your feelings being considered, the sense of the relationship being something they invest in actively, that they think about, that they make decisions in service of, not perfectly, not without failure, but with consistent, demonstrable evidence that you matter to them enough to show up for. It is going to feel like being able to be sad in front of them without managing the sad, without softening it or speeding it up or resolving it before it makes the room uncomfortable. Just being sad if you're sad and having that received, having them stay in the room with the sadness without trying to fix it or talk you out of it or make it about them. Just being there with you in it. That quiet, difficult, generous act of companioning someone through the thing they're feeling without requiring the feeling to be different. It is going to feel like laughter that is not a performance, like being so comfortable with someone that the funny things are just funny, the ordinary moments are just ordinary, the silences are just silences. Nothing requiring decoration or management. Being able to sit in a room together and read separately without needing to narrate the experience or check whether the other person is still happy. Being able to be boring together, have the boring be enough. Have the boring be its own kind of intimacy. The intimacy of not needing to impress. It is going to feel like disagreement that doesn't feel like a threat, like being able to see things differently, genuinely differently, not in the small, polite ways, but in the real, substantive ways that matter, and have the difference be okay, interesting even. Like being able to argue, actually argue, without the argument becoming a referendum on the relationship, without the conflict becoming something that makes you afraid you're going to lose the thing, because the foundation is solid enough to hold disagreement, because the love is not so contingent that it collapses every time there's friction. It is going to feel like choosing each other after you've seen everything. After the novelty has faded and the shine has normalized and you know each other in the full unromantic Tuesday morning way and still choosing, still wanting, still finding reasons, still turning toward each other in the small moments and the large ones, still being glad it's them. A very quiet now. That is what I wrote that night. That is what I finally understood. And I want to tell you, whether you have it or you're looking for it, or you had it and lost it, or you're not sure you believe in it, or you've been settling for the smaller version because you didn't know the larger one was real, I want to tell you it is real. The love I described is real. It exists. It is not a movie version. It is not an impossible standard. It is not something for other people who had better luck or better starts or better examples to learn from. It is available to you. Not without work. Not without the grief of releasing what was less than this. Not without the willingness to be alone for a stretch rather than badly accompanied. Not without the hard, internal work of understanding your own patterns, why you were drawn to what you were drawn to, what the anxious version offered you that you were treating as love, what the performed version was protecting you from that you now need to find another way to address. That work is real and it is not quick and it deserves to be taken seriously. But on the other side of it, or while you're in the middle of it, the love I'm describing is available to you. It is not hypothetical. It is the thing that is waiting for the version of you that has done enough of the work to recognize it and let it in. I want to say something specific to the person who is in love right now but has a quiet, persistent, uncomfortable sense that something is off. Not a dramatic wrongness, not obvious mistreatment, not clear dysfunction, but something quieter, a subtle unease, a sense of not quite being able to exhale, a sense of managing rather than being, a sense of love that is real but also not quite right, not quite safe, not quite the full version. I am not telling you to leave. I am not qualified to tell you that, and it wouldn't be my place even if I were. What I am saying is trust the quiet discomfort. Don't dismiss it as being too demanding or having unrealistic expectations. Don't talk yourself out of the thing your body already knows by telling yourself that love is hard and relationships require compromise and nobody gets everything they want. Because there is a difference between the discomfort of genuine growth, the friction of two real people doing the hard work of actually loving each other, and the discomfort of being in the wrong thing. The first discomfort has direction. It is moving towards something. It makes you more. The second is circular. It uses your energy without producing growth. It keeps you at the same place or somewhere smaller. You know which one you're in. You have always known. And if you haven't trusted that knowing, I am asking you to start today. Not to do anything dramatic, just to start trusting what you already know. And to the person who is alone, who has released something that wasn't right and is now in the particular empty space that comes after, I want to say this: the empty space is not the destination. It is the passage. What it asks of you is not to fill it immediately, but to be in it with some degree of willingness. To let the quiet be informative rather than just painful. To use the space to get clearer on the thing you're looking for, not as an abstraction, but as a felt sense. What does safety feel like in your body? What does ease feel like? What does someone who makes you more yourself feel like compared to someone who makes you less? Get clear on the felt sense of it so that when it arrives, you recognize it, so that you don't accidentally pass it by because it didn't arrive with the intensity you'd come to associate with love, because it may arrive quietly. The right thing often does. It may arrive without fanfare, without that initial overwhelming intensity that the anxious version always had. It may arrive feeling almost too simple, almost too easy. And that simplicity, that ease, may make you think it isn't real, may make you think it isn't love because it isn't the version that cost you everything from the very beginning. Let me tell you clearly that simplicity is not a warning sign. That ease is not evidence of shallowness. That quiet is the thing you've been missing. That peace is love's truest ground. And the fact that it doesn't feel like emergency does not mean it doesn't matter. It may mean it is the realest thing you've ever had. Stand still in the center of the stage, very direct now. I wrote something at the very end of that night, when I was almost done, when the lamp was still on and the city was still humming outside and the Tuesday was almost over. I wrote it knowing I might come back to it, that it might need to be said out loud somewhere to someone when the moment was right. I wrote a love should feel like coming home to a place you've never been, familiar and new at the same time, safe in a way you didn't know safety could feel, big in all the right ways and exactly the right size in all the others, like something your body recognizes even though your history has no record of it, like something you were always moving toward even when you didn't know there was a direction, like finally, like oh, like yes, this is it, this is what it was supposed to be, that is what I understood on that Tuesday night, and I am sharing it with you tonight because I think you deserve to understand it too, not from a book, not as a concept, as a felt sense, as a standard, as the thing you hold in your body and use to measure what is offered to you against what you are worth. And what you are worth, what every person in this room is worth, is the full version, the real version, the version that makes you more yourself, that lets you exhale, that holds your vulnerable parts carefully, that chooses you after knowing you, that disagrees without threatening, that stays in the room with your sadness, that makes the ordinary days feel like enough. You are worth all of it. Every single part. Don't stop until you have it. Don't settle into the smaller version and call it realistic. Don't trade the real thing for the convenient version and tell yourself you're being mature. Hold out. Do the work. Trust the quiet discomfort.